So that's also very exciting. While we wait for the people that are in the waiting room to join us, if you can please change your full name to, however you want us to address you, your organization and where your location, where you're connecting from, that would be great. So name, organization, location on your Zoom name, that would be very, very helpful. And yeah, I think we have everyone in already. So yeah, today, welcome everyone. Just in case you forgot why you're here today, we are on this session, which we called Supporting Producers, a Systems Approach. And we are going to introduce some aspects of Farmer Support Systems Toolkit. It's a discovery session, so it's going to be an introductory one, but hopefully focus on other things as well that I think you might find interesting beyond sharing the toolkit. I'm going to share my screen now. And if you see me turning, it's because I've got two computers, one for screen sharing and one to see you all. So here we are. Yes, perfect. So yeah, for the next 2 hours, we are going to be having hopefully an interactive, engaging conversation about farmer extension services. And yeah, the invitation is for you to show up, put your cameras on as much as you can. We are going to invite you to participate, to share your thoughts, reflections. We are going to make this session practical and experiential, so applying the ideas and the concepts that we share to your work. And as I said, it is an introductory session, and we are always more than happy and welcome everyone that wants to learn more about this session or this toolkit to connect with us bilaterally and follow up on deeper and more conversations if needed. My name is Maria Soledad. You can call me Sole Riestra. I'm the training and learning advisor for the FACS, so Food and Agricultural Commodity Systems team at UNDP. And I'm going to be co-facilitating this session with Nicola, who's going to introduce himself shortly. And we also have Federica, who will be providing technical support. So yeah, if you would like to briefly introduce yourselves, that would be great.
Hi everyone, Nicholas, also from the same team at UNDP Food and Agriculture Commodity Systems, Senior Advisor, and I'm based in Brussels, Belgium. Fede, over to you.
Thanks, Nico and Sole. Hello, everyone. I'm Federica. I am part of the UNDP FACS team and supporting today the session from Spain, actually. Over to you, Sole.
Thank you very much, Fede. And just to share a little bit of context around why we're running this session and what you can expect basically from it. As I mentioned, this session is part of a broader set of interventions and learning spaces that we are creating from the FACS team to support FOLUR project, but also broadly our community of practice, which I think most of you are part of. And the invitation is to think, how can we approach and think differently about farmer extension services and related challenges? And so this is an introductory session where we want to focus on build our capacity on how we can understand, assess, and strengthen national farmer extension services, national farmer extension systems using a more holistic and systems-based and participatory approach. And this session is going to lead into another deeper session that's what we call a problem-solving workshop that's going to take place in June where we're going to work specifically on some chosen challenges on farmer extension services. And we're going to try to hack them, to crack them, and try to bring some innovative thinking into them. So hopefully, yeah, you're going to find this session interactive, useful, fun, and we look forward to hearing your thoughts and ideas on it. How we're going to structure the session today, we're going to focus on three things. First, as I said, invite for collective reflection. So it's not going to be just us presenting, but us as a group having a conversation around how we can work with farmer extension services challenges in a more holistic way. We are going to introduce the Farmer Support Systems Toolkit, and we're going to do a bit of a role play to practice how we can use it. And most importantly, try to learn and connect with each other. We have people from all over the world, different countries, different projects, so it's a great opportunity for deepening our connections with colleagues. And in order to start walking the talk on what we say we want to do in this session, one of the things that we always introduce in this kind of learning activities is a practice that we call check-in. And this practice of check-in, the purpose of it is to create a space where we can introduce each other to at least one or two other colleagues in a deeper, more meaningful way, and hopefully create that level of trust and safety that allows us to engage more, but also show up more personally. And because we're talking about farmer extension services, supporting producers, and this idea, this notion of the land brings us together. And the check-in is structured around a key question. And the question that we are inviting you to explore today in pairs, in breakout rooms for the next 10 minutes is, to which land or landscape are you strongly connected to, and what connects you to it? So we are going to send you in pairs into breakout groups, and the invitation is for you to take 4 minutes each to share your response to this question. Doesn't have to be sophisticated or thought through, whatever comes. And for the person that's listening, to just listen in. No need to provide smart solutions or feedback or focusing on what to say. Just focus on listening and appreciating what the other person is sharing from their life experience. So 4 minutes each, and then yes, you can have around 2 minutes for wrap up and coming back to the plenary. So thank you, Fede, for sending us into the breakout groups.
Thank you.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you, Fede. I can see a massive comeback. So yeah, hopefully you managed to, in the short time, have a bit of a meaningful conversation. And so, yeah, the question for those of you who just joined us in the last few minutes, we were doing a paired check-in. And the question was, to which land or landscape are you strongly connected to, and what connects you to it? So I'm going to stop sharing the screen so that we can see the group. We have quite a large group today, which is very exciting. And so I'd love to invite maybe, one or two people to share what came up during that conversation for yourself, or what did you hear from your partner during the breakout group that resonated with you? Who would like to go? I can see
start, Sole, if there are no volunteers.
Go for it, Larry. Thank you. Yeah, of course.
Thank you, everyone. So I was in a breakout group with Sarah Page, and yeah, we were discussing like on two different kind of landscapes. So the one that were linked by art, let's say like family or where you grew up, and the one that were more related work-wise. And for me, for instance, like growing up, I grew up by the sea, so it was the photo on the top left corner. And then work-wise, it's maybe a mixture of different photos that we saw in there, because there is like different kind of commodities, and then there was mountains, snow, and a mixture of those. And same for Sarah, because she has been working in different projects over different countries and commodities. So it's several of them. And also now she's now focusing on like on a more integration between landscape, also focusing on interaction with urbanization and landscape, like covering different ecosystem, let's say, and different commodities. So it was not just one of them, but it was several for both of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lavinia. Thank you for sharing. Maybe one more? Who would like to go? Carlos, can I invite you to share something about what might have come up for you?
Hi, Sole. Thanks for inviting. It's the first time I join an event like this interaction, so it's a very good idea. I have a conversation with Zainuddin Zain, who works at FAO Indonesia, and it was very interesting. We discussed some similarities that our work has. For example, in cacao production, and he mentioned that they are doing some work on cacao and agroforestry in Indonesia. And we at the IFC here in Brazil, we're also doing some study with a company here to understand productivity in agroforestry and also a regular plantation for cacao. So it was interesting to see how it works in Indonesia and maybe how it can expand here in Brazil as well. And also some differences between the countries. Here we have many projects with soy and beef for underfolur. And the reality of the farmers are like larger scale production, and compared to Indonesia, it's more smallholder. So it was interesting to see the contrast and the similarities in different products.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Carlos, and beautiful sharing, because it leads to what we are going to continue on with this presentation. And I'm going to pass it on to Nicola to build the linkages between the check-in and the rest of the session. So over to you, Nicola. And for the rest, if you have anything that you would like to share that came up in the conversation, please do so on the chat if you haven't done so here in the plenary. So yeah, I'm sharing the screen now.
Thank you, Sole, for this great check-in. That was a good question. I like that. So yeah, we're going to spend a bit of time together looking at a very high level introduction to farmer support systems. We're going to do an interactive exercise also to see your own experience in your own countries. I mean, it's great to see the diversity of regions and landscapes and countries represented here today. So we're going to do an interactive exercise to see what has been your experience with farmer support system or extension advisory services. And I'm going to also present a quick introduction to the toolkit to see how relevant it can be or not to your own projects, initiatives, etc. So next slide. Can I ask, let me see, can I ask Patty from the World Bank to read the quote here?
Okay. Agriculture is our wisest pursuit because it will in the end contribute most to real wealth, good morals, and happiness. Thomas Jefferson. Nice.
Thank you for emphasizing the wisest. Yeah, so we like to start by sharing quotes. Obviously, farming, is intimately connected to the social, environmental, economic, wider systems we are all part of. And I think many of us are working very closely with farming, with agriculture, with food systems, etc. And it's also deeply connected to organizations' mission, being for FAO, World Bank, UNDP, IFC, and many others in the room here today. So, for UNDP, we have different signature solutions that you might be aware of, like poverty, inequality, gender equality, environment, governance, etc. And obviously, agriculture and farming is key for achieving the mission of UNDP. Next slide. I'm just going to put some very high-level figures for you to see farmer support in perspective. Agriculture accounts for 70% of freshwater use. Agriculture is responsible for 8% of global deforestation. Always amazed me, that figure. And I've heard yesterday, we had a similar session for another region yesterday, and someone said it's actually 90%, the latest figure of agriculture contribution to deforestation. Drivers linked to food production cause 70% of biodiversity loss, 60% of the labor force in agriculture, producing 25% of GDP in low-income countries, and over 2/3 of people surviving on less than $1 a day live and work in rural areas, either as smallholder farmers or as agricultural laborers. So many of you have seen those figures many times. In a way, the strange thing is we often get disconnected from those figures if we've seen them so many times after 10 years, 20 years or more of experience, but they do matter. And if you go to the next slide. So we, as we face climate change and other challenges, many of which are derived from unsustainable agricultural practices, such as deforestation, as we've seen, soil degradation, biodiversity loss, we already have a call to move away from just sustainable practices to shift to regenerative agriculture or regenerative practices, which is, many of you know, not only to minimize the harm done to the land, but actually to restore the health of the land. And at the same time, as practitioners, we know that we can see how difficult this is, to bring those sustainable regenerative practices when the majority of farmers are still struggling to survive. If you look on the visual on the right, I'm getting old, I need my glasses. Nearly 1 in 8 people experience chronic hunger. That is 870 million people worldwide. And of the 1.4 billion people living in poverty, 1 billion are living in rural areas where farming is basically the main source of subsistence. So on one side, we want to bring all those sustainable and regenerative practices, and the reality of farming is a reality of, poverty, inequality, and just struggling to survive for many, many farmers. So how can we approach, farmer support more holistically, more systemically? That's a bit the conversation here today. Next slide. I'm just going to give you a very high level about how the concept has evolved over the past 40, 50 years, for those who want to know more. So, yeah, we saying farmer support systems here for UNDP. People talk about extension services, advisory services, and there are many definitions reflecting different vision about how you can achieve agricultural developments and how farmers should be best supported. There's many philosophies and methods around farmer support systems. But the key thing, as you've seen in the figures before, is that it's a really powerful tool to break the cycle of, poverty, vulnerability, low productivity. And, it's key for the adoption of more sustainable or regenerative practices. And the potential for change by focusing on farmer support is enormous. So I'm just giving you in the chat a definition. Let's see, up. And can I ask Lily to read that definition in the chat?
Sure. Rural advisory services are the different activities that provide the information and services needed and demanded by farmers and other actors in rural settings to assist them in developing their own technical, organizational, and management skills and practices so as to improve their livelihoods and well-being.
Thank you so much. And so today's understanding of those rural advisory services has been mainly through four key changes. I think in the past, if we look at 40, 50 years ago, it used to be mostly delivered by governments. And now there's a better recognition of the diversities of actors providing extension and advisory provision. You know, public sector, a lot of the private sector, sorry, is providing those services now in many commodities, many agricultural situations, but also civil society organizations. That's one main shift from, you know, a public advisory services to a pluralistic provision of services to farmers. The second key shift has been from really a pure focus on productivity and agricultural production to a broader set of services. You know, if you look at income, market linkages, food security, health, livelihoods, gender considerations, etc., supporting farmers with marketing issues, etc. So moving from a really focus on productivity to a broader set of services. Then the third shift has been about, you know, a technology transfer approach to adult learning, you know, and how do you go beyond training, just training to education. And the final shift has been from moving from linear approaches to system approach, which is also something we're going to be looking at today. However, our experience, and maybe also yours, is that in many countries, the linear approach or the focus on production still dominates many of the provision of advisory services, and unfortunately, extension services, farmer support system still fail to deliver in many production countries. So we wanted to understand a bit what's your experience, instead of me just talking and you feeling very bored about my explanations about extension services. And so we're going to go on Menti. So you go to menti.com and you have the code there, 54506611. And the question for you is, how advanced do you think farmer extension services are in the landscape you work with, in the country you work with? Yeah, it can be a country, national, subnational level, etc. And then Sole is going to share at the same time, what are you thinking in real time? So at which stage do you think farmer extension services are in the landscapes you work with? And if you have problem connecting to Menti, just let us know in the chat and we can help you. And even uncoordinated. Yes, so quite production oriented. And if you want to put next to your answer which country or landscape you are referring to, you don't have to, but it's also interesting. Not sure, I don't know, it's basic, it's nascent, unreliable, limited, advanced. Public and private services are broadly used in Brazil. Still provided by governments. Systemic challenges. Extension limited to initiative from the private sector. Overextended, not that advanced, promoting rural development. So we have 13 people on the Menti, with 36 in the room. So if you didn't manage to join yet, and up, all answers, yeah. Not very sophisticated, yet some progress, supported by government, delivered by NGOs, progress stage, system change with little impacts. Yeah, so you can see, very quickly here from the wisdom of the room, you have, different service provider. It can be, in a country or in a landscape, more the private sector delivering or more the public sector. There's not one model. It can be really advanced or not advanced, which shows already the different experience and of different countries, and how, program like FOLUR, where some of you are part of FOLUR today, what type of experience we can share across 27 countries. My first job was in a cooperative in Brazil, where the extension system were super, super good, where they had a lot of money, the cooperative members, the farmers, were selling seeds, and there was an entire breeding program, and they had their own research center, so they could deliver all the farmer support system just from the membership, etc. So it was very successful, and I've been in other places where it was, of course, less successful. What is interesting with extension also is that some were really advanced in the past and not anymore, with shift in policies in the past 20 years. There have been actually countries where the extension services have collapsed, where they were really good in the 80s, in the 70s, and now they're not good anymore. Anyway, so that's just to share a bit the range of realities and experience on farmer extension. If you can go to the next. So yeah, we're going to close the Menti. And the next question for you is actually, without me explaining, what is farmer support system more, is what is needed to move forward. What gets in the way and what do we need? And maybe to kickstart the discussion, let me ask one of my colleagues who did a very nice intro yesterday live, if you can just say from your own perspective and your own experience. Yesterday I said you had like 30 years experience and you got really upset. So you only have 12 years of experience, you're not that old. How do you want to, what do you think gets in the way and what's needed moving forward? And then we can discuss in plenary about that.
Yeah, so 18 years, okay, still a lot, but not 30. Okay, so I think when I started 18 years ago working in coffee, hardly any private sector companies worked systematically with farmers. So the traders would just buy the coffee and export it, but they didn't really engage in farmer support. That has changed. They're still not perhaps doing enough, but there's certainly something going on from the company side. The public programs, NGOs and donors work in the landscape. My experience is that it's not coordinated at all. Also, the companies don't like to collaborate because they're competitors, etc. So I think that a way forward for me, I can't see any of those groups handling all the challenges by themselves. But some kind of hybrid system that leverages the strength of all these actors, I think that's the only way I see is feasible.
Thanks, Leif. Anybody else wants to share about what's needed to move forward from their region perspective or their own initiative or project perspective? Can be anything.
Sorry. I have a question, actually. Do we have examples, Leif, of where that's happening? And is that something we could be doing, is learning from the places that are really doing that well?
Leif, you want to answer that? You mean the coordination?
I have not seen anywhere where it really works well, to be honest. But I think what we know that what is needed, because often these different stakeholder groups have no space where they come together and align and work on their shared vision. So let's say an NGO would train in something, an exporter would maybe train in something else. Maybe the government puts emphasis in something completely different. So I think it's both the contents, the approaches, what works and what doesn't work, that people can learn from each other on the approaches. But there is no really space that organize these stakeholders. In most countries, I would say that's probably the case. And so I think it's the opportunity for the follower projects around the world to stimulate that kind of collaboration and joint alignment of visions through these collaborative spaces. I'll stop there.
Thanks, Live. I see Melissa, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, so this is not a response to the question, but more like what you were saying before of like what is needed to go towards this more holistic approach. And I think we need quite a few things. First of all, there needs to be investment, because there's a lot of discussion about supporting a more systematic approach, a more holistic approach, a more multi-stakeholder approach, but often people don't want to invest in it or finance it. So there needs to be a commitment to investment. And also there needs to be national leadership, because those are really the people who can rally around the different actors in a particular landscape or sector, and not only national, but regional or provincial leadership at that matter. And they need to be combined, because one without the other, then you kind of have like a table without one leg.
Thank you. What is needed to move forward? Anyone else wants to share the experience? Don't be shy.
Yeah, or maybe to Patty's point, for those that shared positive experiences, maybe it would be good to hear what made those experiences positive or make those extension services work. But Robert, I think you wanted to share.
Thanks, Sole. Gosh, what worked? That was from another time when the world was a little bit less crazy than now. Extension services, typically, they would work, they would have a balance. They work with the producers, i.e. the private sector. Government would provide, support, and then academia was involved. So you had these three components that would work together, and that worked really well. And then I don't know what happened. Extension services were, the big businesses took over extensions to sell their products, right? And guide producers in what they should use. I think for our purpose here, it would be very helpful if we took an approach either by region or by commodity. I think it's quite different to work with coffee or with cattle, right? Very different premises, different conditions and different markets, even though they're all commodities, but I don't think we have a one size fits all here. So that is just maybe a suggestion that we could group by commodities. Even by region is difficult because you have, I'm in Latin America. Brazil is a huge country and Paraguay is a very small country, and they both have folures in the same commodities. We'll certainly work together, but anyway, just 2 cents of wisdom on that. Thanks.
Thanks for sharing. I may be interested to hear from colleagues here from Brazil, where there's a lot of capabilities and investments, and as you said, Carlos, some successful situation there. So yeah, maybe you want to share the experience of Brazil or the model, or why make Brazil different, maybe in terms of successful approach to extension.
Hi, Nicholas. And so I have more experience with the extension provided by the the private sector. So as you mentioned, the cooperatives are doing a good job with that, and then are growing a lot in Brazil. They started in the south, and then they are entering and started to operate in the Cerrado, the west of the country. So they're bringing this the cooperative spirit and our work, say, environment together with the extension projects there, and they're raising their relevance there. And also you have growing companies that provide service attached to some certificates. One good case here is a company called Produzindo Certo, and they assist farmers to produce, let's say, more sustainably, and they assist the farmers to get the certificates, and this is being used by, or they're being hired for by big trading companies. So it's a kind of extension also that these trading companies are using to access farmers and help them to increase productivity and produce more sustainably.
Thanks for sharing. Excellent. Yeah, and I think also one thing to share from yesterday's conversation with another group was that, you know, there were some views also that extension were disappearing, or there was no more efficient support systems. Yet, you know, anytime you work with certification or sustainable practices or regenerative agriculture or landscape jurisdictional approach, at one point you need to build capacity, and you need to provide training, and you need to provide training beyond productivity. And so it's still very much central to all the work that we do on sustainability and agriculture. So I'm just going to, building on that, I'm just going to present a bit an introduction to the Farmer Support Toolkit that UNDP developed to see how relevant it can be for EU initiatives. But I'm not going to spend too much details because we're going to do a role play also after the break, where you can experience by yourself how it can work. So next slide. So the idea is really we developed the toolkit actually with Andrew in the room here. I think I saw him before, really with this idea that how to help see farmer support from the question that Life mentioned about, you know, it's uncoordinated, the actors are not working together, or what was said that, you know, the research was working with the government and the private sector. So how do you facilitate multi-stakeholder collaboration? How do you see things systemically, that everything is interconnected? And really the purpose of the toolkit is to provide guidance to the practitioners working with governments, society and business about how you can assess and strengthen existing either national or subnational systems. And how do you see you know, everything together as a framework, like we talked about finance, the importance of investing. I can see digitalization into the chat. So how you take into account all the technologies, the innovation, all the things that exist into one framework. Because often when we are in policy dialogue and we talk about extension, the first thing that comes to mind is how we're going to train farmers, you know, or maybe we're going to talk about, let's have a mobile app to transfer the information with the farmers, but how do you go beyond that? And so, how do you assess what's your current system, and based on that, how you develop collective vision, strategies, and plans for strengthening the existing systems? And I think many of us have had the experience of we go to farmers and they say, well, actually, last week we got trained by this NGO on gender, and this week we are trained by this organization on production, and next week we are trained. So there's a lot of overlaps, there's a lot of confusion, there's a lot of training material that are repeated and are not efficient. So this toolkit is not a methodology about training farmers, because there's lots of literature out there on the subject, but really how you can strengthen the overall system. And so next slide. So we developed an analytical framework to use throughout the process that's basically show those different things, like first is the enabling environment. What's the vision that exists in the country? As Melissa mentioned, what's the leadership? What's the ownership at country level about extension system? So what's really the enabling environment? What's the diversity of service provider? Not seeing in isolation one group, but seeing that as, what are the different stakeholders providing support? What are the partnerships, the linkages we can make with research, with academia, etc. What are the organizational and management capacity? The staff numbers, the training levels, the management systems, the advisory methods. How do you develop the curriculum? What's in there? How much sustainability considerations are put into there? How do you deliver? Is it a demonstration plot, a farmer field school, etc.? And what's the importance of technologies or digitalizations, and etc.? The key questions of budgeting and financing. Often in conversation, we build a very long wish list of things we want to improve what's needed to move forwards. But how do we make sure that this is included in budget levels? What are the sources of funding? What's the financial sustainability? What's the business model? We talk about the business model that some cooperative in Brazil have, so that they are able to deliver that training over the long term. And how do you allocate money to the different places that are needed? And finally, what's the learning, the M&E aspect? What's the adoption? A lot of our work is on training, but what's next? Are those sustainable regenerative practices being adopted by farmers? What's the farm level performance? How do you work with continuous improvement? So that was developed based on previous work conducted by experts working on extension, and we try to tailor it to sustainable commodity production. So you can apply to specific commodities, like you said, on coffee, on cocoa. You can apply it to a national level, or you can apply it to a landscape level, subnational level. Next slide. So the toolkit gives a kind of model about how you can go about it, but this is just informative, and you can really take what you need for your own countries or your projects, and you can adapt the timing, you can adapt what's most useful for you. So, the precondition is to have a kind of, like Life mentioned, is to have a forum, a kind of platform where you can bring the different service providers together and the farmers to discuss what is needed. It's a forum. Sorry, I'm not looking at the chat at the same time, so I'm sure there's some very good discussion happening in parallel, but I'm not following yet. So there's a forum where you can have that conversation about what's the status of our current system and how to improve it. We developed a diagnostic scorecard using that framework that can help the stakeholders see what is the status of the enabling environment, what is the status of the training, what is the status of learning, of the technology, of market access, etc. And then the idea is that build on that scorecard, then you can develop improve farmer support strategies, plan and budgeting, etc. Next slide. So for example, on the previous cycle of JEF, so now we follow JEF 7, on the JEF 6, we had the Good Growth Partnership that some of you are familiar with, and we've piloted that toolkit in 2 places. To give an example, one at national level in Liberia, where we had a national platform on palm oil specifically, and they had an entire working group on farmer support, because obviously to make palm oil more sustainable, farmer support was a key areas of support. And so they used that diagnosis scorecard to help define what farmer support strategies they want to have into that collective action on palm oil. And we also used it in Indonesia, but at a subnational level in Pelalawan, where we translated that scorecard to the reality of Indonesia. It was translated in local language, and the exercise actually led to 3 new regulations from the government about how to work with farmers and the private sector in that specific district. So the way that the scorecards work, I'm almost finished in terms of this high-level introduction, is you take every element of the analytical framework, and you, in that forum, in that dialogue, it can be virtual, it can be face-to-face, it can be anonymous or not anonymous. You go through different questions about what's the status of your current system. You know, is there a vision for extension services in Brazil or in the Cerrado, or is there a vision in Uganda? So non-limited satisfactory goods. And the idea is that here you will get the perspective from the different participants in the forum. The private sector might have one view, the government will have one view, the civil society. Sometimes there is an alignment, there is a shared vision, shared understanding, sometimes there isn't. And so what are the recommendations then for strengthening? You know, what's the level of buying of stakeholders into that vision? You know, what Melissa said again on leadership in that country. Next slide. And so here you can see, for example, on the level of buying, this is just some example. You know, the Ministry of Agriculture thinks maybe that buying is high, while the private, because they actually wrote the vision, while the private sector does not fully support the vision because of many reasons. So that's kind of a typical scenario we are faced with in some of the countries we work with. So overall, there's a facilitator and the group agree that the level of buying is limited. And, you know, as a recommendations, the stakeholders think we need to develop a new vision as part of the next medium-term development planning, because then that can be translated into the budget. So that's just to give you a very concrete example about how the framework can lead to a conversation on shared understanding and collective action, if you want. Next slide. And this, you know, once you've done that diagnosis, the next stage is then to see, you know, what improved strategies, a plan you want to have in that particular commodity, national, subnational level, etc. So here's just an example on, for example, the training material. This is, you know, for example, you have, as a collective action, people decide we need to update the existing curriculum at national level that is outdated, and to train farmers on sustainable production. So the commodity board will be responsible. There will be supporting institutions. The baseline indicator is that your curricula is too old. We need a new one. We're going to do it in 1 year, 75,000, and it's going to be paid by the commodity board and donors. So this is what the toolkit is trying to do. Obviously, this is easier said than done. I think all of you are practitioners, and you know that in the reality, in the mess of when we work, when we are in those meetings, there is a lot of conflict, power dynamics, different views, etc. And it's sometimes very difficult to facilitate such discussion. But yeah, I think the idea, the minimum, is that the toolkit help bring that broader view about you know, all the different elements that can matter, and you can extend that analytical framework if needed, and is also giving you the opportunity to have a shared understanding of where you are, because often we jump straight into what needs to be done, but we don't have yet a full understanding of where we are. And so the diagnosis scorecard gives you that. So I'll stop here. It's a lot of information to digest, but through the role play, I think you're going to get a better understanding of how useful this can be or not. Back to you, Sonia.
Thank you, Nicola. And yeah, before we jump into a quick 5-minute break, I would like to ask if there's any questions or any comments, any reflections based on what you've seen and what Nicola presented. I can see Tom is sharing something on the chat. Tom, are you able to open your mic and share a bit more? Is that possible for you right now? Any other comments, any other questions, reflections? Okay, we will get those sparked during the role play then. And what we're going to do, oh, no worries, Tom. Thank you for sharing on the chat. What we're going to do now is we're going to ask you to stay connected on this Zoom call, but we are going to take 5-minute break because obviously we've been asking you to stay looking at a screen and sitting down for quite a while. So we are going to reconvene in 5 minutes, so 10 past the hour. Don't disconnect from the Zoom, just put your camera off, your mic off, and we will come back in 5 minutes and we will get into the role play. Thank you. See you in 5 minutes. Short, but hopefully refreshing break. So as we get everyone back in our virtual room, I'm going to ask you a very simple yet not so simple question, which is, how many sticks do you see? And you can put your answer on the chat if you want. 4. Thank you, Valeria. 4. Okay. 8. That's a surprising one. I don't hear that one very often. So good innovation there. 3, 4. 4 from one side, 3 on the other. 2. Live, I love your 3.5. It always makes me smile. Yeah, so how many sticks are there? That is the question, right? And I guess we'll never know. Or maybe there are many different ways of seeing it. And the reason why I wanted to bring this slide is basically because we've been talking about how do we bring commitment across stakeholders, how do we coordinate different efforts, how do we bring stakeholders together, and in a way this comes to a very basic, simple understanding that we can have various different perspectives over the same image, the same topic, the same issue. So in the awareness that we can have different perspectives, from that foundation, from those bases, is that we can start building a shared understanding. How do we give visibility to those different perspectives? And in a way, the diagnosis scorecard is trying to create that very practical, concrete way in which we can bring stakeholders together and give visibility to how different groups are seeing a different reality. Some might see 4 sticks, some might see 3, others might see 3.5, 8, 7. So once we grant visibility to that, we can start working on creating a shared vision. And this is what we're going to do for the purposes of this role play. And I believe Federica has shared or will be sharing in a minute a list of your names and the stakeholder group that has been assigned to you. So please do remember that, because we're going to ask you to play this role play from the perspective of that stakeholder group. So let me welcome you to the Farmer Support Forum of the Republic of Kandesi. Welcome. It is an honor to have you all here today. You will be playing the role of one of the key stakeholder groups, as I said before, that are present in this Farmer Support Forum today. And the Republic of Kambesi, I'm going to share a bit of background, is one of the largest cocoa producing countries globally. And equally, cocoa is the first export of the Republic of Kambesi. So it is a very strategic crop. And our focus today as a collective is on 3 strategic areas of work: sustainable cocoa production, climate change adaptation, and deforestation, as cocoa's been recently under the spotlight as a main driver of deforestation in the Republic of Kambesi. So these are the three key strategic themes that we're going to cover as a group and that are bringing us together. In the Republic of Kambesi, there are 3 service providers providing support to farmers. There is the National Cocoa Commodity Board from the government, the cocoa and chocolate companies that are also providing services, and the NGOs that are funded by donor projects. They all have different priorities, different strengths and weaknesses. Now, we've seen this before. This is our first meeting together. We've established the Farmer Support Country Forum with representation of government officials at national and subnational level. We have supply chain actors, we have development partners, we have civil society organizations. And as we are following the guidance from the Farmer Support Systems Toolkit, which we saw before, the different steps, the guidance proposes these 4 stages, and we are at the moment on the assessment phase. And in the assessment phase, there are 2 things. There's a diagnosis study and the diagnosis scorecard. We've already conducted the diagnosis study on the Republic of Kambesi, and it's that 150 pages document, imaginary document that we sent you for pre-read, which you imaginary read, and we will share an executive summary of it anyways. But this diagnosis study was a quantitative study that has been already completed, providing us some background information on the performance of the farmer support systems in the Republic of Kambesi. And so now we're here today to conduct a qualitative assessment using the scorecard that was developed by UNDP. But before we move into that qualitative assessment, I need to share with you a few results of the quantitative study, this diagnosis study that's part of this assessment phase. And again, remember, this is all fictional, it's a role play. There's no 150 pages document that you need to read. You've got probably plenty of those already. So just simply put yourself in the shoes of the role that has been assigned to you to the best of your knowledge and your imagination. And the idea here is to experience and understand the mechanics of the diagnosis scorecard and how it works in practice, and spark some ideas of, how would you inquire a bit more into each one of the questions and the results that you might get when you use the scorecard. Now, Nicola shared this before. The qualitative assessment will be conducted using the Farmer Support Systems Analytical Framework, which was presented earlier on. And this analytical framework is going to allow us to look at farmer extension services from a more holistic perspective, using the 5 components and the 15 key elements. Now to the executive summary of the 150 imaginary pages document. So we use the analytical framework, we use the Farmer Support Services Toolkit to conduct our own studies on the Republic of Kambesi, and we found a number of things. So first, we realized that the 3 service providers have very different priorities, strengths, and weaknesses. The Cocoa Commodity Board is really interested in increasing productivity, and one of the key strengths is that they have a very strong regulatory framework. The private sector, they are interested in the volume and quality of the cocoa that's being purchased. And in terms of strengths, they recently developed an action plan on cocoa and deforestation. The NGOs are really interested in the number of farmers trained, and their focus is on improving livelihoods, and the strength is that they are very good trainers. So overall, the study showed that there is a misaligned interest agenda. There's no shared understanding of the key issues to be addressed, and there's a huge opportunity to improve productivity. As you can see on the slide, current productivity is of 350 kg per hectare, with the potential to be increased tenfold. The study also showed that the current situation in terms of collaboration is that stakeholders are coexisting and competing, but they're nowhere near collaborating. And there's lots of competition, egos, people are working in silos, there's a lot of duplication of efforts. And the training materials that have been produced were produced separately by each service provider. There's no coordination or synergies. Finally, the study also showed that there are low levels of trust between the three service providers. And the perception from the people we interviewed was that the institutions were kind of serving the interest of a few people and not everyone, and each institution is not seen as a good partner for the other. But despite all of this, we are all here today together, and there is emerging dialogue taking place through this country forum, and there's willingness to start collaborating. So we're going to conduct the exercise on the scorecard to see where that leads us. And if you can please connect on Menti again, the code is 56398956, and I'm going to share my screen, my Menti screen, so that you can actually see and first, the first thing we're going to ask you to input is which organization you are representing based on the role that you've been assigned. So thank you for sharing your inputs. We have one cocoa farmer, very eager to participate. Development partner second, government is showing up, private sector and civil society are there, starting to engage, more development partners coming in. So yeah, we're getting some movement in this forum today. We seem to have some shy participants because we only have 11, 12. Good. Let's see if we get some more before we continue. "13. Okay. We're 22 here today, so seems like some people from the forum are kind of shy and oh, that's okay. Zainuddin, you can't connect. Maybe Federica can help you then with that. No worries.
Yes, thanks, Sole. Sole, there is like, if you, on your slide, if you go up, please, or can't send the number, there is like a code, a link, sorry, that you can copy and paste in the chat, which is easier, perhaps. Could you kindly try that, please?
Sure. Yeah. Can't insert the number. Oh, do you mean this?
No, that's okay.
Let's try again and see
yes.
Yeah, if we can
Could
help
you,
Zainuddin.
perhaps, Zainuddin, do you have a mobile app with you? Like a mobile phone with you?
Yeah.
Because if so, you can copy and paste the link there. I can have your chat, thanks.
Otherwise, you can also use the chat. Yeah. You can also use the chat if you want to share your views in parallel. We can have different ways of participating in the forum. So we have the stakeholders now present here today, and so we're going to have the first question on of the diagnosis scorecard. Give me a second. Yes. And so the first question is asking, what is the level of shared vision for national and subnational extension services? So please, if you can share your answers based on your role and perspective. So we have cocoa farmers basically saying that it's from none to limited, so non-existent to limited. We have private sector offering a bit of a more optimistic view, at least one stakeholder. But mostly it's on the very limited space and one development partner together with private sector thinking, well, it's actually quite satisfactory. We've got one more. But it's interesting to see how not only they're spread across the different stakeholders, but even within each stakeholder group, we can see how there's a spread in the responses, you know, cocoa farmers, private sector, development partners. So that's also an interesting insight in terms of sharing different perspectives. Let's go to the next question and see what we can find out. Existence of long-term political commitment will for sustainable commodity production. Interesting. Who would like to share from the private sector in a 1-minute pitch? You're standing in front of us in the forum. From the private sector, who would like to share what's driving the responses here? What do you see? What do you think? Who's been assigned the private sector here? The private sector is not showing up.
Yes, if I may.
Very good. Yes.
So,
we're all
so
here.
first of all, just a little, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So private sector. Yeah, we as businesses are sometimes siloed as private sector. I just wanted to remark that the farmers themselves are part of the private sector. I think it's a little bit paternalistic to have them as, you know, the farmers who need support. We all need support. We all need an enabling environment to be able to work within the legal frameworks. And the legal framework is oftentimes contradictory. We perceive the government as policing the processes and charging us with environmental requirements of minimum reserves, etc., and taxing us, but not supporting us. The support that we get and the political will for sustainability in our investments is quite limited. So we would like to have the government and the authorities of the different sector ministries and the finance have a closer look at how they conduct their stick and carrot participation in our value chain. And I think there's a lot of work that they can do to meet us halfway. Thank you.
Thank you very much for opening our eyes to a different perspective around who is part of the private sector, and for sharing your concerns and your perspectives as well on what needs to be done and what can be done better. I can see that Sarah from the private sector as well is sharing. Would you like to say something, Sarah? Are you able to open your mic?
Yes, I can just share. I didn't know how much time, but I just said that as a member of the private sector, you know, I appreciate the ambitious aim set out in the national level cocoa sector strategy, but I feel that it lags in implementation because of a lack of real financial commitment, which would signal that the government was very much committed to supporting improving the production and quality, and mitigating some of those environmental risks like deforestation that the private sector is concerned about, which would be needed to really support this being the primary source of sustainable cocoa.
Fantastic, Sarah. Thank you very much for sharing very eloquently the vision of the private sector. I'm wondering if anyone from the government stakeholder group, the public sector, would like to share his or her perspectives based on what we are seeing on the screen, but also what we are hearing. Who's been assigned to the government? Live, would you like to play the role of the government, even though you might not have had that assigned to you?
I'm actually just registering a comment from the civil society. So if I
Okay.
can do that instead.
Yeah, please go ahead.
So I would say, as a member of the Indigenous Women's Cocoa Producers Associations of Cambesi, I really want to register my discontent with the government's commitment to us women cocoa producers. Almost rarely we are heard or receive any kind of support. So I think that's really important that we change that. So that.
Excellent. Thank you very much for sharing such important and relevant concerns. I'm not sure if we have any other stakeholders that would like to share their views. Seems that we might need to continue with other questions, but it's good now that we've opened up the conversation. Yes, Götz, please, over to you.
Yeah, I'm not a government, but I will play the role of government. As government, I'm actually not as interested as the private sector in increasing the production, because this might lead to a reduction of price. I'm much more interested in keeping the production limited, maybe lower than the demand to reach a price increase for my producers.
Thank you very much.
This, by the way, also means that I would not want that the extension services are completely controlled by the private sector.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So I guess we are kind of seeing the different perspectives and how, you know, something as simple as what we are seeing on the screen can open up the possibility to share concerns and responses to those concerns. Let's continue with a couple of more questions, and then we can round up the conversation with again more high-level reflections. Okay, another dimension of the scorecard, organizational and management capacity. There is a fair distribution of extension workers across geographical areas. What do the different stakeholders, the groups think? No. Limited. Wondering also how the conversation that we just had is impacting your own way of giving input to this exercise as well. So again, you know, from a facilitation point of view, from a usage of this toolkit point of view, you know, when do we introduce conversation? How do we manage the different views of the different stakeholders is also an interesting thing to bear in mind. Yeah, so we seem to have a very aligned view around no to limited on the fair distribution of extension workers across geographical areas. Let's do one more, and then we can go into reflection mode. Organizational and management capacity, there is an adequate reach of women commodity farmers. Well, I think we've heard already a point coming from civil society that that wasn't the case, but let's see what others think. We seem to have one development partner that seems to have the perspective that it is satisfactory. And most of the responses going into limited, very limited, and no. Good. Excellent. Okay, so I think you get already the gist of it and how it works and what kind of possibilities it can bring in terms of opening up, making it visible. First of all, making visible the differences in perspectives, but also opening up the space for conversation. Let's do the last one, and then we go back into plenary conversation mode. Advisory methods, services focused on holistic needs of commodity farmers. What are your thoughts? Very limited, limited, no. So again, you know, there seems to be agreement on this being a particular aspect that could be improved. So how do we leverage on that? How do we leverage on those points where there is alignment, where there seems to be agreement that these are areas that can be further improved? Thank you very much for playing this role play with us, going for it with commitment to your roles, and even improvising other roles that you haven't been assigned to. So yeah, I would like to pass on the floor to Nicola and to Leif to share, you know, your own experiences and sense of how this has been applied and what are the possibilities, opportunities, and things to bear in mind when using it.
Yeah, I can maybe, so thank you all for playing the role play and being in your role. That was nice to see. Yeah, maybe just to share an experience in Indonesia where we tried to do exactly that. And there was, so maybe, yeah, it's interesting to see how you can adapt it to your own needs. So for example, there was already an existing forum in Indonesia. So that was at the district level, at the landscape level, but it was not specifically focused on farmer support. They were talking about, so it was also in the context of palm oil. So they were bringing all the stakeholders working on palm oil together. So thanks to the toolkit, they managed to convene a group of specifically focused on farmer support, you know, the academia, the service providers, etc. So it was not easy to talk openly about key issues, you know, and especially, of course, elephants in the room. And so we decided to do that actually anonymously. And there was also reasons where we had to do it virtually rather than face-to-face. So we had to adapt. And so the first adaptation we did was that it was anonymous, so people were more free to share their perspective, because there's really very different views about the extension systems. And the only thing we kept on the Mentimeter, it was SurveyMonkey, or I don't remember, but we kept the stakeholder group because it was anonymous, but it was important to know what's the view of the private sector, what's the view of the government, what's the view, you know, farmers, including in private sector or not, etc. So that was one thing. And really different views, I think, that experience. And the other interesting thing to note is that when we were negotiating the application of it with the partners on the ground, they felt like, oh, you know, one or two things are missing in the analytical framework that we presented today for the context of Indonesia. And so, you know, it was very easy to adapt and say, well, you know, for example, they want to do much more on digitalization, for example, or on gender issues, or on specific practice related to sustainability. So you could add that to the framework and to the diagnosis scorecard. So they didn't use the diagnosis scorecard from UNDP, you know, I don't know if it's 60 or 70 questions, I don't remember. They changed it, some of them, and it was translated. And so just to say how adaptable it is based on your needs. So I'll stop here from my perspective.
Thank you, Nicola. And yes, Leif, anything that you would like to share or add?
Well, maybe a comment on the Farm Sport Toolkit. So what I think is really important about that is that it fosters a dialogue that make people discuss or dialogue to increase their own understanding and their learning and their sense making of their own situation, as opposed to how we often do it in our organizations, is that we commission some really smart and knowledgeable consultant to tell us what it should look like. So this is really more about the process of discussing and what people the understanding that people develop doing that. You know, I've not had a lot of possibility to actually use that toolkit in particular, but I think those processes are often a revelation for many people who, when they participate in events, it's often top-down presentations or endless passing around the microphone, but very little group sense making. So I think that's really the big value of a tool like this.
Yeah, and maybe I can add two other things. Is also our experience has been that it's usually more successful when applied in the context of a broader national or subnational discussion rather than in isolation, you know, farmer support in isolation from the rest, because everything is interconnected. Isolating the topic of farmer support from the rest can create its own silo, you know. So, but if you use it in the context of a national planning or subnational planning, then it's allowing the stakeholders to zoom in on an important topic. And maybe a last comment is, for those interested to go deeper, if you read the toolkit, there's actually in the stage between diagnosis and developing strategies, we recommend, so you can see the role of the facilitator as a key role, you know, because how do you facilitate such a process? How do you navigate those different power dynamics, etc.? So the facilitation is a key role, and you might have in your projects those capabilities, yes or no, you know, so you might need to have support on. But the other human resources we talking about in the toolkit is a financing expert, because as Melissa mentioned, you know, it's all about investment, and you will with the diagnosis scorecard, you can end up again with a wish list. When you see recommendation for strengthening, well, we need more extension workers, we need more money, we need more this, we need more that. And at the end of the day, you have something that is great because you have a shared understanding, but that is not realistic at all in terms of what's feasible in the country. And there we struggle because it's very difficult to find a financing experts who's understanding those dynamics. And we start looking for sharing a business model that worked when it comes to extension systems. And we mentioned Brazil here today, but there's many other examples. But we found it very difficult to find someone that is expert about, these are all the business model that is working and that can be adapted from that region to that region, etc. So the financing aspect has been a struggle for us, like many others actually, and that's why it's difficult to move the needle on that. So just sharing some experience.
Thank you, Nicola. Thank you, Live. Any questions, any reflections that you would like to? Yes, Patty, over to you.
Yeah, no, really, really interesting stuff, you guys. And I found myself saying the same thing, that the key will be that dynamo facilitator, definitely. I guess our other experience with these kind of dialogues is they can be very powerful in raising the issues and the different perspectives, as we've seen. It's the follow-up that's the real rub, and you've alluded to that. I'm wondering about how we use it in the context of our 27 Fuller projects. And two, I guess, lessons from my past come up. If you're jointly co-developing something that helps you with your work, then it's more likely to go to the next step and go forward. So if you're saying, like, at the national level, if there's a policy window of opportunity for an action plan that needs to be developed in the next 6 months, you can see how this could fly quickly. At a lower level, maybe like a sub-regional level, if it leads to a business plan or a much more concrete thing to take to finance people, to take to private sector. So I'm wondering if there's some thought about linking it to concrete things that come out of this, and it would be different in different situations, but it's probably not a whole lot of them. There's probably, what, 5 or 10 you could think of. That could be a powerful addition to this. There's just a few of my thoughts.
Yeah, exactly. I think there's two very important points you touched there is the demand for it. Our experience, if there's demand for it, if people see farmer support or those type of seeing, the importance of collaboration, in addressing farmer support, then it's much easier to go through all the different steps than if you just a top-down, this is a toolkit, use it. So specifically for Follour, I think the interesting thing with Follour is that actually out of the 27 projects, and Lavinia is going to speak a bit about that, many of them have an entire component on farmer support. I don't know how many countries out of the 27, but I know, we also design some of the projects, and so some have activities related to farmer support, setting up a forum, having a multi-stakeholder process around it, developing a farmer support strategy. So there you have an entry point that is already in the project document. But I think a lot of the land use, there's a lot of national planning or subnational planning that needs to happen as part of Follour that will have for sure some farmer support activity. So this is the whole idea of the discovery session, is that, so Follour stakeholders can see, maybe that's useful or not, but maybe that's a good transition to Lavinia Solé on explaining about the specificities of Follour on farmer support.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Patty, and thank you, Nicola. So we're going to take the last few minutes to share how we're starting to make those connections. How are we starting to look at farmer support systems toolkit through the eyes of Follour? And Lavinia is going to share the results of an exercise that we've conducted, that mostly Lavinia conducted, looking at the pro docs and mining What are the challenges that have been identified there, and how can we then organize them in terms of the analytical framework? But Lavinia has done an amazing job with this, so I'm going to let her share more specifics on it. And Lavi, I'm going to share my screen, so just let me know. The floor is yours.
Great, thank you, Sole, and thank you, Patty, for the great segue as well, that it wasn't planned with that. And yeah, in relation to how we are applying this toolkit to FOLUR, and thanks, Alexandra, for those of you that are not familiar with FOLUR. FOLUR is the Food System Land Use and the Restoration Impact Program under the JEF 7 window. And yeah, if you can please go to the next slide, please, Sole. Thank you. So what we have done, it was actually at the beginning of last year, we conducted an exercise where we look at the FOLUR country project documents. So under FOLUR, there are 27 country projects, and at the time of this exercise, there were 24 of them available. So this covered almost all the FOLUR country projects. And we carried out desk research to map the challenges affecting the farmer extension services in those countries, according, again, to the project documents. And we identified some patterns among the challenges, and we structured these group challenges against the analytical framework of the UNDP Farmer Support System Toolkit that was just presented to you by Nico, and that we use for the role play. Now, obviously, this analytical framework is just one way of trying to provide a more holistic and systemic perspective for farmer support and extension services. And there are many other ways as well. And at the same time, there are many other challenges that have not been covered by this desk research because they were not mentioned in the FOLUR country project documents. So you can see in this slide the 13 groups that we identified in relation to most common challenges affecting farmer extension services. As Sol already shared before, this PowerPoint will be shared with you as an handover, follow-up emails after the session. But now we would like to bring this work further and continue developing this work together. So this is why we launched an online campaign through the FACS, the Food and Agricultural Commodity System community, the FACS community and its digital platform, where we are sharing a card related to all of these 13 challenges with more details. So in here you can see mainly the title, but in there you can find a more detailed description. And we are inviting you to share your inputs and views based on your experience to kind of elevate this desk research and to enrich it with your inputs, kind of what we did during these 2 hours together today. And this is just like the beginning of additional work that we are planning and we are doing, especially under the FOLUR Impact Program. But as Nico and Sole were saying, this toolkit is applicable way beyond just this impact program. So I invite you to share your inputs. You can see that a link has been shared in the chat. You can go there, and all your feedback will be taken into account for the next steps of this journey that we're taking together. And in case there is no question, I'm passing over to Sole, which will close and run us through the next points. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Lavinia, for sharing the work behind the exercise that was conducted. And as Lavinia mentioned, we are going to share this for the participants of today's sessions, and we are sharing the challenge by challenge on the digital platform. We would really welcome everyone to share their perspectives, views, reflections, because obviously this is what enriches the discussion and the exercise. And so in terms of what's next, before we move into checkout and hear from everyone present, the invitation is for everyone that's joined this session today to continue exploring ways of seeing and acting on farmer extension services in a more systemic way. And we welcome any contact and bilateral conversations if you want for us to continue, because we are conscious that this has been an introductory session. As we said, share your thoughts and experiences on the FACS digital platform, where we've posted all the challenges, and we are continuing to do so for the next few days. And as a leeway, connecting these discovery sessions to deeper work, we are going to run the Accelerating Innovation on Farmer Extension Services problem-solving workshops for FOLUR countries, and this is going to be the first edition. There will be 2 more happening this year for to cover different time zones. This is happening on June the 20th and the 21st, and an invite will be shared shortly. And in these sessions, we are going to look at a specific methodology that has been created by a partner that we work on called Systems Mapping Academy. We've co-created this methodology with them, looking at how can we bring innovation in a simple, agile way applied to farmer extension services and FOLUR country projects. So this is it from a session perspective. The last thing I wanted to share, as Nicola said, we love quotes. And this is a quote from Fukuoka Masanobu. If you know who that is, please raise your hand. I'd be curious to know. If you don't know, stay tuned, because we are going to open a discussion around his work. But the quote is that the ultimate goal of farming is not the growing of crops, but the cultivation and perfection of human beings. So we're going to leave you with that. But before we go, I'd love to ask you, to share any final thoughts, remarks, reflections, anything that you feel we need to hear or that others need to hear before we move to probably another call, if you have another call, or maybe stretching your legs. Yes. Robert.
Can you hear me? Oh,
yes.
Thank you. So yes, I can appreciate all this work that is going into these sessions and the platform that is trying to make sense, like Life said, trying to make sense of it all. It's a huge challenge. We're working across regions, countries, commodities. Maybe, I don't know, just thinking out loud, as we move forward, trying to focus, like I said before, on a work by commodities. I think it would be easier because there's such a wide variation in challenges that we have to address, and trying to fit everything into a mold or into a system. Una sistematización in Spanish, systematizing, can you say that? Everything looks a little bit like a, I don't want to use the word top down or ivory tower, but if you're on the ground and if you face the challenges, in one continent on one commodity, and then you look at the other one over there, there may be synergies, there may be parallels, but it's such a huge challenge. So I'm looking forward to having some work done where you compare apples and apples, just to make life easier. Maybe, I don't know, that's just my thought on this. And thank you so much for all I know how much work is behind this, Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you very much. Any other thoughts or questions or feedback that you would like to share? We will share a post-session survey as well, so we will collect more feedback. But thank you very much for your time and energy and engagement with us. I think that's what makes it a learning experience, besides or beyond whatever we have to share on the screen and then any toolkits and slides. Thank you, Zainuddin. Yeah, thank you for your feedback. And yeah, we'll see you in the next session or in any other forums to continue working together. Thank you very much.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.